Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We have a webinar planned for you. Data aggregation is unavoidable and other big data lies. I am Erica Fowler, Product Marketing Manager for Molecula. I spent the last 12 or so years in strategy and analytics across various industries. I also have a PhD in epidemiology, which is where I learned my love of data and analytics. I'm here today with my colleague, Dennis Cody. He's Product Manager for Featurebase at Molecula. Dennis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dennis Cody. As Erica mentioned, I'm the product manager here at Molecula for Featurebase, our real-time database product. I've spent much of the past decade working with big data to better inform myself and customers. Before joining Molecula, I have consulted for over 50 clients, primarily in the public sector, but also financial, healthcare, and energy sectors as well. So good to meet everyone out there.
Nice. We have a great session for you planned today. So first, we'll tell you a little bit about Molecula and our mission. Then we'll do an overview of data aggregation to get everybody on the same page. And then we'll talk about a better way to do things. And finally, we'll wrap up with Q&A and discussion. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please drop them in the question queue. We'll get to as many as we can today during our time. And we will also make sure to follow up with anyone after the webinar if we didn't get to your question. So please drop them in that queue and we will get to them either today or after the session is over. So Dennis, I'll turn it over to you for the Molecula introduction.
Thanks, Erica. All right, so before we get into the main topic of pre-aggregation, let me first lay out what problem we at Molecula are trying to solve. We all know that data is a valuable asset. Every organization has a stockpile of data sets that they could be using today to derive value and improve business. Those who do this best gain a competitive advantage in the market, but it's a constant struggle to make your data actionable. That's because to make that data actionable, we have to prepare and serve it fast enough for it to be relevant. At Molecula, we close the gap between data and decision. And by doing so, we enable organizations to unlock the power of real-time analytics and AI. By eliminating slow pre-aggregations, Molecula accelerates data-driven business innovation. All right, let's get in the old, what is data aggregation? So what do we mean when we say pre-aggregation? In short, pre-aggregation is copying data into an intermediate or use case specific data set. Other names could be roll-up tables, materialized views, denormalizing, etc. If you've heard these terms while working, you're probably doing pre-aggregation. Did I miss any other fun terms for pre-ag, Erica?
I don't think so. I think you got most of them, but I do want to call out that there are two kind of forms of it. There's aggregation and pre-aggregation, and they are sometimes used interchangeably, but aggregates also have an entirely different meaning and use that's often necessary. So something like a data science model that requires you to aggregate data in order for it to actually work, like that would be one way that aggregation would be necessary. But what we're going to focus on today is specifically pre-aggregating data to speed up your queries in the specific business use cases that go with those. So when you hear aggregation, like today, what we're really talking about is that pre-aggregation that you're using as a way around speeding up your queries, not something that is actually necessary.
Really good call out.
All right.
All right, so let's take a look at a dummy e-commerce example, something that's small and we can cover in a few minutes. In this example, we'll have an e-commerce store that's trying to figure out how to improve their conversion rate from visitors landing on a product page to actually purchasing the product. The data sources on the left, you can think of as like web logs, ad analytics, et cetera, I've put color-coded circles to show lineage of a piece of data so we can see it's being copied throughout the system. From this little example process alone, we can already see data has been copied about 2 or 3 times very easily. But this is a little example. In reality, the situation's even worse. So there's actually a recent report from market research firm IDC, which they note, and I quote, the ratio of unique data to replicated data is roughly 1 to 9. So that means for every unique piece of data, there are 9 copies. That's 88% overhead. Why is this so high? The thing to note is that we have a physically separate tables for intermediate and use case data sets. So this means we need external batch processing wherever you see an arrow connecting 2 tables to literally copy and process data each time there's an update. From my personal experience, this can be a nightmare. I did a lot of work with Hadoop clusters, and denormalizing was the only way to get sub-minute queries. With like an empty new project, starts off great to build and develop and innovate. But 6 months down the road, you realize you have no idea what's being used and what's feeding into what and where I can delete and change data. You'll be totally lost in the weeds of hundreds of data tables. I'm pretty sure you probably actually have some more stories. Erica, you want to talk about some?
Oh yeah, for sure. So one of my, I guess, favorite horror stories to tell about this is it's bad enough when your engineering team is spending their time pre-aggregating data, but it's even worse when a junior analyst is doing it for their own project. So this was for the first model that I ever built in a commercial setting. I was just learning SQL and understanding like relational databases and how the data were organized. And I had to make a pre-aggregated table to run my model because the data, it was transactional, like credit card, debit card transactions, et cetera. And I actually duplicated the revenue for about half my sample that I was working with, like 6 times over. So the model and then like the month of work that came after it was just all trash, basically. And I had no idea until it was like too late. Luckily, it was a pretty low stakes situation, but definitely not the only time that's happened. And then you touched on something that I think is really important. One of the ways that you can summarize transaction level data in a way that you can visualize is to pre-aggregate it, typically to get the speed, the query speed that you're looking for like an interactive dashboard to run at like an acceptable time for a user, is to pre-aggregate it. But as you said, there's like a new roll-up table or a new reporting table that's made for each new dashboard that comes along. And anytime there are upstream changes that happen, it's really difficult to figure out all of the spots that are impacted without doing a lot of work. So a lot more of my time than I want to admit has been tracking down changes like this, reports not matching, things breaking, et cetera. And pre-aggregation is like the bad actor there.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's actually, in my experience, if there was ever a feeling of literally drowning in digital data, you definitely feel it there.
Absolutely. Definitely.
All right. So we promised you big data lies. That might have been a lie. No, I'm just kidding. So here they are. And they actually stem from the pursuit of speed through pre-aggregation. It's really easy for people to think about big data as, infinite scaling. You're already spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. So what's an extra, 10 grand for more storage? So first off, this is a sunk cost fallacy, which always makes me a little nervous, but we're going to keep going. Another lie, I'll just delete or archive old data sets I don't need anymore. Well, if that's true for you, you're a better steward of data than me, because I never saw the risk outweighing the reward for doing that. Finally, big data systems can scale in performance. If I buy more hardware, I can improve or maintain performance. In theory, yes. In practice, there's a ton of hidden asterisks to that statement, and the truth is typically found in white papers or with SME expertise. So you're paying for it, or like my colleague Erica, probably have a PhD. Regardless, these statements are doable if you got Google money or resources. But for everyone else, you're going to hit a point where you're spending too much and taking up too much time or too much resources, and you can't feed the growth anymore. With pre-aggregation, you're going to hit that point far faster than you think. So the ugly truth. So we talked about the lie. Here are the consequences of those lies. Disks are cheap, but disks are attached to compute and compute is not. In order to get more disks, you need more compute. So it's way more expensive than you actually think it is. It's a hidden cost. Number two, and I had this bolded because this is the granddaddy of all truths. Data is more valuable than gold and oil. It will never get deleted. No one has ever lost a job for not taking the initiative to delete data. Out of curiosity, Erica, how much data have you deleted in your career?
Well, I would say I didn't get fired, but I've definitely been yelled at a couple of times by our engineering teams for keeping too many old data sets around in like sandbox environment. You know, final data 1, final data 52, CDE. You know, it's really hard to let go of data. You've worked really hard on it. You know, there's probably something in there that you're going to need later. So yeah, definitely, I've not been fired for keeping data around, but I've made some people pretty angry. And it becomes a problem because you lose all control of your project. And, you know, if you have to go back and make changes, it's very difficult to figure out like what you were thinking in that moment when you created some weird name for this data set that you promised yourself you would remember that it was the right one or whatever. So yeah, this is definitely speaks to me.
Yeah, I mean, when you have your tables all dependent on each other without, you know, with these automated processes, and you start magnetizing the problem by like 100, right? You're going to lose track of the situation very fast. And so you just kind of give up and you're like, I don't care. I'm just going to move on, create another data set and get done before Friday.
Yep.
All right, so let's tie it all up. More data means more disks. More disks require more compute. To manage more compute, you need more expensive employees. All of a sudden, you're looking at an increase of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year to keep feeding that growth beast. The only folks who are profiting off these lies are the platform vendors billing you. The more data you store, 88% of data, which are copies included, means more revenue for them. So here at Molecula, we think we have a better way. We call it Featurebase. We, with Featurebase, can eliminate the need for pre-aggregation in order to attain true real-time analytics. In real-world implementations, we regularly improve time from source to query from days to seconds with zero pre-aggregation. So do you remember this slide from earlier? Note the times at the top. I actually missed it the first time, and I'm the one who actually created the slide. You know, minutes, hours, days to update the data set you need for your use case. Days, that's a long time. So how do we do data at Molecula? With Featurebase, we can do rollups and aggregations at query time, not before, directly from the source tables. We can do this because we don't do analytics on the record data itself, but the unique features extracted from the data first. This allows us to operate on a data footprint up to 90 times less than a traditional data warehouse. It's ultimately not magic. We can answer queries with a lot less data, which allows for real-time querying on less hardware for customers. With that said, how we do it can be a little complicated to explain. So for that, we actually have a small video snippet to show, better than my words.
Great, let's see it.
Molecula reduces the dimensionality of data to its simplest form by collapsing conventional data models and abstracting the relationships in the data, creating a highly optimized feature-first data store that maintains data compression when queried, all without copying or moving the raw data itself.
So that clip has paid for itself many times over.
I was just gonna say, I remember seeing some version of this for the first time a couple of years ago. The first time I was introduced to Molecula was actually during a pitch at a former place that I worked. I loved it so much that I'm here today as part of the Molecula team, and I'm really excited about what the capabilities that we're bringing and the, eliminating the need for pre-aggregation. And yeah, seeing this video where it kind of intersects, that just blew my mind and is a huge reason that I'm here today. What about you, Dennis?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more of a childish reason, but ultimately I thought it was just cool to have something new. So, you know, I mean, the idea of databases and doing data analytics in a modern fashion, you know, that's probably been around for decades, right? Not a lot has changed. There's not a whole lot of revolutions. And so it's kind of interesting over the past decade, I've kind of called myself a database hipster, playing with like Redis or Mongo or Elastic, which were all these quirky little GitHub projects and now multi-billion-dollar companies. So I apparently have a good track record. And so what stood out to me about Featurebase was how it physically prevents you from copying data. It physically makes you think about data in a way that makes so much more sense and is so unique that to me it was truly a revolution. So I thought it was cool, so I joined too.
Absolutely. I know that video went really quickly, so now that you've gotten some context from both Dennis and myself, we're going to play it one more time just to let it sink in case you missed it.
Molecula reduces the dimensionality of data to its simplest form by collapsing conventional data models and abstracting the relationships in the data, creating a highly optimized feature-first data store that maintains data compression when queried, all without copying or moving the raw data itself.
All right.
All right. So now that you've seen it the second time, hopefully you kind of get a better idea of how we're solving the problem. Businesses today operate in an ever-increasingly competitive environment. We all need to not only solve known requirements faster, but react to unexpected changes faster. Featurebase was actually born out of necessity by a customer segmentation startup. Over time, they grew their data volume and their use cases for their customers. And it became too problematic to get real-time results with traditional tools, whether it was the latency or how much hardware they had to manage. And so they designed and built Featurebase, which is a purpose-designed tool for a startup to analyze massive data sets in real time with a smaller hardware footprint. So less folks needing to manage, less hardware needing to operate on, faster results. With that, I am going to stop talking and turn it over to Erica to show how we've actually helped customers in real life.
All right. As Dennis said, we're going to walk through a few real life scenarios for customers that we've helped. But first, I wanted to kind of ground everyone in our business outcomes and use cases that we've come across so far. So today we'll be talking about 2 customer experience use cases. We found that there is definitely the need for real-time data and access to large volumes of data in real time to be able to have a big impact on this business outcome. Other ones are anomaly detection and then optimizing internal business processes. Today we're going to focus on the customer experience, but we also have information about the other business outcomes on our website if you're interested in checking that out. So first, customer experience. It's been all the rage for a few years now, at least, and there is no sign that it's going to slow down anytime soon. So in 2019, I was so surprised to see this statistic, but about 25% of customer interactions were automated through AI and machine learning. And by 2023, with 90% of companies planning to deploy some type of AI, that number is expected to be 40%. So in 2023, 40% of your customer experience interactions are estimated to be driven by AI and machine learning. It's crazy to me.
Are we creating Skynet?
I'm sorry. No, but but after the last couple of years that we've had, customer experience is even more important. We had the pandemic, which upended consumer trends all over the place. We thought that was ushering in this acceleration of e-commerce, and while it did, we're finding that some of those trends that we thought would stick around aren't as sticky as we thought. So, identifying opportunities in real time is going to continue to be really, really important. So without further ado, our first customer, they Our first customer is an ad tech company that they receive about 2.5 billion transactions per day. And they're expected to grow that volume 5 times over the next 12 months. So just think about data on that scale. It's so much data that they're pulling in every single day. So in order to analyze those transactions in Google Cloud so they could improve ad bidding, they had to do pre-aggregation queries. And those took between 36 to 48 hours to prepare that roll-up table for analysis. 36 to 48 hours. Once that roll-up was completed, it still took about 5 minutes for their analytical queries to run so that they could, optimize their bids. So 36 and 48 hours plus 5 minutes is absolutely not real time. So what did we do with Featurebase? We completely eliminated the need for pre-aggregation, and their queries were executing in 41 milliseconds. So they've now gone into this realm where they are doing real-time ad serving, and they're able to serve up an audience in under 1 second in order to optimize their real-time bidding. So huge improvement, and it actually is enabling them to do something that they really couldn't do before. Another one, similar since it's customer experience, but this is a global leader in electronic devices development and manufacturing. And they built a portfolio of CRM applications for their audience segmentation. They built it in-house. This one application, it has approximately 200 or more million contact records, so people, with 1 terabyte of data updates daily. So again, massive scale of data, so much of it. And this application supports the marketing engine used by like all lines of business in the organization. And we're talking just a lot of data, a lot of usage that's happening. So Molecula scoped out an opportunity with them to support their lines of business, and they were going to help them create campaigns. So the outcome is they were spending 8 hours building a campaign, which again is far from real time. With Molecula, we reduced that from 8 hours to 8 seconds. I mean, it's not the 41 milliseconds, but still 8 hours to 8 seconds for dynamic audience segmentation is enabling real time. So we've taken these 2 customers from not actually being able to execute real-time customer experience, and now they're able to churn through their data very quickly and deliver on the business outcome.
I mean, 8 seconds sounds like a long time, but at least for me, it's still short enough that I'm not going to just wander off and go grab a cup of coffee and come back in an hour. So
Right.
something you can actually iterate on.
Yeah. Like, how many times have you written a query and hit run and you're like, I'm going to remember to come back to that in 15 minutes because I know it's going to take a while? No. And then, you miss your semicolon, it times out, like, I don't know, just all kinds of things that can happen there. So not only are we enabling the real-time serving of the data for the applications, they're also able to churn through their data and analyze it so much more quickly without having those long query wait times in between. All right, so if you want to learn more, please go to our website and you can request a demo, and we'll have someone reach out to you if you just want to learn more or just have like a more in-depth conversation about Molecula or Featurebase. Please do that. If you already have a use case in mind, we'd love to hear it. So molecula.com and go request a demo. So I think we're ready for questions.
All right. Yep. So questions have been coming in. Got time to answer a few. So I picked 4. Here we go. What's the difference between pre-aggregation and pre-processing? I mean, I think I have my opinion on this. I don't know about others. Like for me, it's pre-aggregation is you have to know ahead of time what your data set's going to be and gather your data and create like a static table with that data. But you have to know it ahead of time. Pre-processing, I think more of like ETL with like cleaning and formatting and standardizing. I don't know. Is there a proper term that I'm missing?
I don't know. I think that makes sense to me. Like the pre-aggregation, one of the ways I like to think about it is, and I think you may have said this earlier, but with pre-aggregation, like you can monitor your known unknowns. So you have to know what you want to look for first, build your pre-aggregated data set, and then you can monitor for changes, but you're not able to do any kind of innovation or further exploration of the data because you've already dictated what is in that data set. And then, like you said, I consider pre-processing more of the like data in and out, and like there's a lot more to it, and like pre-aggregation could potentially be one of the steps, but we'd like to eliminate that step.
I mean, it sounds good to me. I'm hoping that we've answered that question. If we hadn't, I'm sorry. All right, next question. How does this impact how much data I have to store? Are you actually ingesting and just making more copies of my data? So we don't do data copying. If we go back to the video, we kind of explained why we don't copy data, but how we do process and extract features out of data, we can actually use about up to 90 times less hardware. Typically it's about 10 times, but it could be as much as 90 times for ridiculous use cases. So we can significantly shrink the footprint. So ultimately you're still using external data storage, but we do not copy of data. All right, I'm gonna give you the next question.
Okay.
Is there ever an acceptable use of pre-aggregation?
I suppose.
Call us liars. Do we have to change this entire presentation?
No, I think that if there's a really solid like reason that you want to use pre-aggregation, if there's like a report that goes out every Monday morning and it requires a pre-aggregation to do, I mean, I think that if it's something that's static and it's never going to change, I wouldn't recommend it if you could get around it. I think that pre-aggregation, as we've talked about today, is not necessary. And with Featurebase, we can eliminate the need for that. I think aggregation, there are times when that's necessary. As we talked about earlier, there's some like scientific or data science models that would, you would need to aggregate your data in order for the actual model to be able to calculate what it needs to do. But in terms of pre-aggregation, I can't think of a time when it should be necessary. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, pre-aggregation is so standard right now as a practice that that's why it's such a harmful tool in the toolbox. I think ultimately there's a lot of other techniques and opportunities folks can do ahead of time to speed up their queries before they turn to the hammer, which is pre-aggregation. Because with pre-aggregation, it doesn't work, yes, but the trick is for short-term gains, you're paying long-term costs. And so that's like the real challenge is it's real easy, especially me, I'm a very lazy employee. I'm very much more likely going to just create another table and get on with my life. But at some point it catches up, and then, you got to do weekend work, and nobody wants to do weekend work.
Yeah. I think maybe like if you're prototyping something and maybe trying to figure out how to do that, maybe then you could do some pre-aggregation. But I think the key term that you mentioned is it's as a short-term benefit. It's not like a long-term solution.
No, really isn't. So that's just my own experience with managing large clusters.
Yeah.
All right. Ooh, here's a good one. So how would Featurebase be implemented into an existing architecture / how can I test to see how Featurebase works for me? All right, I'll tag team you. I'll answer the first part, you answer the second part.
Okay.
So for how would it be implemented into an existing architecture? So your existing architecture actually doesn't change. We augment, we don't actually replace. And so we actually overlay on top of your existing data sources. And what we do is we have connectors that constantly extract features from the data source and process it in our system to speed up your queries rather than replace it. We're not here to be a data warehouse. So that's typically how we augment, we don't replace. All right, so how can they test to see how it works for them, Erica?
You can go to our website and request a demo. I mean, that's the best way to kind of get to the next step and see what we do a little bit more behind the scenes. So if you have any more questions today, please drop them in the queue. We're out of time to answer them today, but we will follow up with everyone after the session. So thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to the next webinar.